crafters, and welcome back to the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. My name is Deepa from Designs by Dee, and today I'm sharing 3 techniques to make your CAS cards more dimensional. Now, I'm a big fan of dimension, and I know that CAS cards are supposed to be simple, but I don't think a little bit of dimension will hurt. So these are some of the products I'm going to be working with. It's just a complete mix. I've got the mini slimline frame-worthy dies, the olive leaf dies, the Meraki Flora, the Good Vibes stamp set, because it's got a bunch of beautiful sentiments, and then these flowers. We've got the elegant stamp set and also the blooming halo stencil. So we're going to use a mix of all of these products to make 3 different cards. So here's my first technique, adding dimension with foam and frames. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab those mini slimline frame-worthy frames, and I'm just taking the 2 smaller frames and lining it up in the center in a landscape orientation on an A2 size piece of white cardstock. Now, most people would stamp out their image and then cut it, but I'm going to do this the opposite way just to show you can. And so I've cut out all of these frames, and these are what I'm going to use to create dimension on this card. So when I go to stamp this out, I have to kind of reassemble this, and I'm only going to stamp on the center rectangle, not on the main base. So I'm grabbing the Good Vibes stamp set here, and I've got 2 of the little floral images here that I'm going to set up on the left-hand side of this rectangle. And then I'm going to grab a sentiment from the Elegant stamp set. So I like the sentiments in the Elegant stamp set because they're a little more bold. It has a bold typed area, and then there are part of the sentiment, and then the other part is just plain type. So it stands out a little more, especially when I have thinner images or, you know, thin lined images like these florals. So I thought it'd just look a little better with this than just having the really small, dainty, handwritten sentiment that comes with this set. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp this out here. As you can see, I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black because I want some alcohol marker safe ink. So this will not smudge or anything when I color this in with Copic markers. Now for the Elegant sentiment, you can see I'm using some VersaFine Clair ink pads, and I'm only inking up half of the stamp. So I'm just inking up the hello there in that purple. And once I've stamped that out, I can then ink up the bottom half with the black. Now, I normally have to add some tape or something to mask each part of the sentiment, but these sentiments are perfect to do this without any masking because they're spaced out nicely. So this one's stamped out perfectly without any masking. So now I'm going to use some Copics to color in these gorgeous little flowers. I'm going to leave my little cap on the screen there so you can see which color I'm using. I'm not doing anything fancy, so I've sped up this process here. I'm just really adding my darkest color, my mid-tone, my light, blending it out, and then I'll go back with my darkest to kind of just emphasize the strokes and the marks for the shadow portions of the flowers. And as I mentioned, nothing too crazy here. So, you know, you can color in your flowers however you want. You don't even have to use Copics. You could use some colored pencils. You can use watercolors, whatever works for you. I chose to use Copics here because in my next technique, I'm going to be using some watercolors. So I wanted to use kind of a mix of mediums just to show you the wide variety of things that you can do with CAS cards. So you can see why I chose that purplish color for, I think it's Purple Delight that I've chosen for the hello in the sentiment because it's going to match the colors that I'm using on the flowers. And then I'm also using some greens for the leaves and the stem. So there isn't too much here for the leaves and the stem, so it's not going to take too long to color that in. And my main goal here with the CAS cards, clean and simple, is that I'm mainly using that white area to kind of show that this is a CAS card, and the dimension is just like an added touch. I know it kind of can take away from the simple aspect of it, but what I'm doing is really simple. I mean, you can just, it really only adds one extra step to what you're doing, so it's still pretty simple. Now, as you can see, I took those frames off of my Altenew stamp wheel there, which is perfect for sticking those down and stamping and coloring. I didn't even have to move them. And then I'm grabbing the outer frame here, and I've added some foam to this, foam adhesive, and then I'm sticking it down to my card base, which is again an A2 size card base. So this is really giving this card dimension on its own. Next, I'm adding the next frame, and for this one, I will add this with just plain tape roller glue. This one is going to be flat to the, adhered flat to the card base, so you get kind of like an alcove or like an inward type look. Then for the next layer, I'm going to also do the same thing here. I just used some liquid glue here because it was a pretty thin frame. Now the next two frames, I'm actually going to attach them together with some foam adhesive, and this is going to go on with dimension. So we have different levels of dimension. So we're kind of alternating between foam, no foam, and foam, and that's really the look I'm going for with this card. So you can see I just basically attached the foam in between the two die cut pieces there, so it actually adhered them together, and so when I attach them to my card it's a little easier. I don't have to attach them as separate pieces. And you can see it all fits together nicely just like a puzzle. Now for my final step, and I'm going to be doing this on all my cards. I know it's simple, but I can't finish off a card without some bling. So I've got some of the the Meraki Sparkle Magical Iris gems here, and I'm just going to set these down, just 5 of them, just for a little bit of shine. So once I've got these down, you can see that it still looks like a pretty nice dimensional CAS card. So moving on to my next technique, I'm going to be adding dimension with foam and die cuts. So I mean, I know we did that last time, but we did do that on a stamped image. Here, I'm just going to use the die cuts. But before I cut out anything, I want to create just a mix of colors. So I'm using my watercolors here. This is just a dot card from Daniel Smith. And I'm picking some purples and pinks to kind of just lay down on this watercolor cardstock. Now again, there's no technique to this, no rhyme or reason. I'm just simply laying down all the color in layers in order to get a nice piece or panel of watercolor cardstock. And when it's dry, completely dry, then I will cut out those Mila Meraki Flora dies, which you can see I'm using to kind of get an idea of where the colors are going to go. So the one tip I do want to add is you have to make sure this cardstock is completely dry, or the dye is not going to cut out your image properly. So I did let it air dry, and then I actually just hit it with a heat tool to make sure it's completely dry. I've gone ahead and cut out 2 of the florals from the Mila Meraki dies, and these are going to be my main focal point. So I'm adding some foam adhesive to the back of the main petals, or the actual flower portion of this flower and stem, and I'm going to just arrange this in such a way that I kind of have that nice curve on that flower on the right, because I really want to do something special, something a little different with my sentiment for this one. So I'm adding a bit of glue to the stem, so that'll be flat on the cardstock here, this card panel, and I've added the flower portion with foam, so there's your dimension. I'll do the same thing with the second one, and I'll tuck that little stem just a little bit under the other, so it kind of looks like more of a complete and cohesive little bouquet here. And as I mentioned, I really want that little curve of the flower to stay there, because what I want to do is I want to line up my sentiment with the curve to give it a bit of interest. And I like doing this with cards, especially with CAS cards, because it really stands out nicely. So I've gone ahead and stuck this panel on my stamp wheel, and I'm grabbing the sentiment I want. Now, in order to get this to curve the way you want, what I like to do is take some acetate, or I've got a bit of packaging here from one of my stamp sets, and I just line up the sentiment there along the vine or the stem of the flower. So the plastic or the acetate just kind of helps the sentiment stick and kind of take that curvy form. And then I also still manipulate it a little bit while it's on the stamp wheel, the actual stamp wheel there that picks up your stamp. So now I've added some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and you can see how cute that looks when you actually put that sentiment along the stem. It gives it a nice elegant look, really indicative of CAS cards. So I'm going ahead now and I'm grabbing some more dimensions. So I've got my foam, I'm cutting it out just a little bit smaller than my panel, and please do note that this panel is actually 4 inches by 5 1/4, so that I get a little bit of a border when I put it on my 5 1/2 by 4 1/4 inch card base. I'll attach the foam and then attach the panel right onto the card base. And then just like before, my last step is going to be adding a bit of bling just to add a little bit of shine. You can see this one is super CAS. You've just got your die cuts. The die cuts have dimension. The actual panel has dimension, and then we've got our sentiment and our gems here, and that card is complete. Now, if you really want, you can always alter these designs. You don't want the dimension, go ahead and take the dimension away, keep it nice and flat. Or if you don't want to add too many details, get rid of the gems. So my next technique is going to be adding dimension with lunar paste. Now, lunar paste is nice because you can use it to kind of add shine and details to dimensional objects or just to plain flat pieces of cardstock, and it goes on nice and thin. Or you can use it with a stencil, and it gives your cardstock a bit of texture within the stencil. It has a bit of dimension there, so that's why I'm going to use that here. You could use any paste you want. You could just use plain embossing paste, texture paste, whatever. This is what's going to give this card the dimension that I want. So you can see here I've got an A2 size panel, and I've just kind of measured along the edge about the width of my ruler. And I've created a little rectangle there, which is going to be the focal point for this card. So I've masked it off with my 3M tape, and I'm adding the lunar paste here with the Blooming Halo stencil. Now, the Blooming Halo stencil is meant to be a wreath. So I'm just taking portions of the stencil and kind of filling in the background. This is just for a little bit of interest. You could use a more complete stencil if you wanted to, but this was the one that I wanted in the background here because it has these nice flowing leaves. So I do want to mention the lunar paste is like amazing because I put this aside and it actually dried faster than my watercolor panel. Sorry about that. So it dried faster even though it's got more thickness to the paste. So it's really nice. It dries pretty fast, and I like that aspect of it. So now that we're done with the lunar paste, you can see how gorgeous it looks. It has a bit of lift, it's got that bit of dimension, and it's beautiful. It shines so nicely. Now I do want to have a little bit of border on my card, so I am cutting just 1/8 of an inch all around because remember we created a focal point which is in the center, so I have to cut all of the sides evenly. Now I'm using my olive leaf dies here. I've got the bigger and the smaller branch, and I'm figuring out that the smaller branch is going to fit more nicely on this card. I'm going to go ahead and cut it out of some light pink cardstock here to kind of go with the pink theme we've got going on. I thought that the lighter pink looked nice with that silver lining lunar paste. I'm adding one of the sentiments from the Good Vibes stamp set. I'm just going to stamp it out on some black cardstock. Sorry, my head gets in the way here. And heat emboss it with some white embossing powder. Now this just gives it a nice clean look. It's going to add a little bit of dimension because we have the embossing paste, we have the embossing powder. This one has like a few more elements to it. You could argue whether it's CAS or not. I'm, as I mentioned in my description, all about breaking these rules. I think CAS cards have got to be one of the hardest things for me to do because I always want to add more. I have a problem just doing a little bit. I have a problem leaving all the white space. I'm trying my best here. So I hope that some of these ideas will work for you. And if you're someone like me, these will definitely work for you because they have a little bit more than a normal CAS card, so they will satisfy you. So now that I have all of my bits that I'm going to use to put together my card, I can go ahead and add my panel here to the card base. Now I'm going to add this olive leaf frond here. So this is my trick for that. I've got these small micro foam squares. This is a little bit tedious, so I just kind of add the little squares onto the little fronds, and they fit there perfectly. You're not going to see them through the die cut. However, it takes a bit of time to add everything and then take off all the little backings. You can see I'm using my tweezers to do that because it's hard to do with just your nails. And I've gone ahead and attached that to the card. So now what I want to do is grab these foam strips. These also come in handy. And I'm going to attach this to the sentiment, and I'll kind of just stick this kind of over the bottom part of the branch. And that's pretty much all that I'm going to do to this card other than adding some bling. And so you not only have the dimension in the sentiment, you have the dimension in the branch, and you have the dimension in that lunar paste background, which I think it looks really nice with the pink here. So I'm just adding a few of those magical iris gems, and this card is complete as well. And these are the cards that I've made today. I hope that something here inspires you. One of the little tips or tricks, or one of the techniques here for adding dimension. The first one here, as I mentioned, is a stamped image where the frame is cut out and we add foam for dimension. The second one here, we have some watercolor die cut pieces and we add dimension, and this cute little sentiment here that flows along the stem. And then the last card adds some dimension, not only with the foam on the branch, but also with the lunar paste, which looks gorgeous when it shines in the light as well. So these are my 3 cards using these 3 techniques to add dimension to your CAS cards. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Add a comment if you like. And please hit the notification bell to be notified of future videos. Everything used in this video is listed in the description below, so you can check those out in the shop. And I hope you all have a great weekend. See you guys next time. Bye.